The sun had barely risen, casting the town in a golden orange hue. Halloween was always magical in Woodridge, a small town where everyone knew each other, and tales of spooky hauntings from yesteryears still lingered in the air. Children began their preparations, excitedly discussing their costumes, while parents set out pumpkins and adorned their homes with cobwebs and fake spiders. But for the 6th grade students at Woodridge Middle School, Halloween that year would be remembered not for the magic, but for the malevolence it brought. Our English teacher, Mr. Roberts, was an enigma. His tall, slender frame always seemed to slouch just a bit, as though weighed down by invisible burdens. His hair was a mix of black and gray, and his thick glasses, which sat low on his nose, gave him an intense gaze. Some said his stern demeanor was a result of a broken heart. Others believed it was the weight of a life filled with regrets. Regardless, all agreed on one thing. He bore an intense animosity towards Jason Tremaine. Jason was, in many ways, a typical 12-year-old. With messy brown hair that never stayed combed and a penchant for forgetting his homework, he became an easy target for Mr. Roberts. But more than his forgetfulness, it was his irrepressible spirit that seemed to irk our teacher. Jason's laughter was contagious, his questions often insightful, though sometimes ill-timed, and his pranks legendary. October had not been kind to their relationship. Jason's latest mischief involved accidentally knocking over a bottle of ink on Mr. Roberts' desk, staining his prized collection of short stories. That earned him a week of detention. We all speculated about the mounting tension between them, often discussing it in hushed whispers during recess. But none of us could have predicted the storm that was brewing. On Halloween morning, a palpable excitement buzzed through the school. Costumed children flitted about, and teachers, in a rare break from tradition, allowed a more relaxed atmosphere. But in room 206, Mr. Roberts had something special planned. His usual grim expression was replaced with an unsettling smile. "As it's Halloween, I've got a special treat for everyone," he announced, producing a bag filled with caramel candies. The candies were handed out, one by one. When he reached Jason, he paused, then handed him a larger piece wrapped in gold foil. "For you, a special one," he whispered, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The bell rang, signaling the end of the class, and like ravenous wolves, we tore into our candies. But a sudden, sharp cry pierced the air. All eyes turned to Jason, who was clutching his mouth, blood seeping between his fingers. The gold-wrapped candy lay on the floor, and amid the caramel were glinting shards of glass. The classroom erupted in chaos. Some screamed, others rushed to help, and a few, like me, stood frozen, unable to process the scene. The school's nurse, Mrs. Whitaker, a kind woman in her 50s with always a reassuring word, rushed in. Jason was immediately taken to the emergency room. In the subsequent investigation, it was clear that the act was premeditated. The specific targeting of Jason, the unique wrapping, the meticulous placement of the glass, it all pointed towards a sinister plan. The news hit Woodridge like a tidal wave. Rumors swirled, and parents held their children close. In this tight-knit community, trust was broken. 2 days later, as the sun set, casting long shadows on the ground, the police arrested Mr. Roberts. His defense was flimsy, claiming it was a harmless prank. But the evidence was overwhelming. The town's single newspaper ran the story on the front page, and soon other news outlets picked it up. Woodridge Middle School, once known for its annual Halloween fair, was now infamous for a far grimmer reason. For Jason, the physical wounds healed faster than the emotional scars. He returned to school weeks later, but was a shadow of his former self. The laughter was gone, replaced by a haunted look. His parents, seeing the toll it was taking, decided to move away the next year. The incident, though years ago, still feels fresh. Every Halloween, as I see children excitedly running around in their costumes, the memory resurfaces, a stark reminder of how the line between childlike fun and sinister intentions can blur. I occasionally hear about Jason. He's become a successful writer, channeling his trauma into his works. As for Mr. Roberts, the last I heard, he was serving his sentence in a state prison. Woodridge, too, has moved on, but the legacy of that Halloween remains. It's a tale told to caution, to instill the values of kindness, and to remember that sometimes the real monsters aren't lurking in the dark, but walk amongst us, hidden in plain sight. It was a Tuesday, and the sun filtered through the autumn leaves, bathing Woodridge High School in a golden hue. The chatter in the hallways was particularly excited that morning. Our history teacher, Mrs. Mitchell, was on vacation, and word was that we'd have a substitute. Little did we know the man walking through the school's entrance would change our lives forever. His name, we later learned, was Mr. Holden. Tall, with a wiry build, he had deep-set eyes that constantly surveyed his surroundings. His smile never quite reached those eyes, but we initially wrote it off as the nervousness of a new environment. "Good morning, class," he greeted, voice smooth, a touch of an accent we couldn't place. Mrs. Mitchell left me detailed notes, so let's not waste any time. The first sign that something was amiss came during roll call. He paused at certain names, especially the girls', his fingers lingering on the paper as if imprinting the names in his mind. Emma Thompson, a redhead known for her assertiveness, caught his particular attention. He seemed to revel in saying her name, drawing out each syllable. "Is there a problem, Mr. Holden?" she finally asked, exasperation evident in her tone. He merely chuckled, continuing with the list. By lunchtime, whispers about the creepy substitute filled the air. The real alarm bells, however, began ringing during our group assignment. Instead of letting us form our groups, Mr. Holden picked them out, intentionally placing Emma and two other girls, Jessica and Mia, together. He then spent an inordinate amount of time hovering around them, leaning in too close, touching shoulders and whispering suggestions in their ears. The girls were clearly uncomfortable. During recess, Emma approached me. "There's something off about him, Alex. I can't explain it, but my gut says he's bad news." We decided to talk to the principal. As we walked to the office, we spotted Mr. Holden in the hallway, talking to a younger student, probably from the 7th grade. His fingers played with her hair, and she looked terrified. This only fueled our resolve. However, Principal Dawson wasn't available. "He's in meetings all day," his secretary informed us, "but you can leave a note." Frustrated, Emma scribbled a hurried message, detailing our concerns. We hoped it would be enough. The next day, things took a darker turn. Mr. Holden announced a special project that required individual sessions after school. The selected students? Emma, Jessica, Mia, and a few others. My name was curiously absent from the list. "I'm not going," Emma whispered to me. "We need to find out who this guy really is." That afternoon, we camped out in the school library, scouring the internet. It didn't take long. A news article from a neighboring state featured his mugshot with a headline that read, "Convicted offender, Martin Keegan, escapes custody." The article detailed his crimes and warned that he was dangerous. Horrified, we printed the article and ran to the main office. The secretary's eyes widened in shock as she read it. "Stay here," she ordered, hitting the security lockdown button. The school's doors automatically locked, and an alarm blared. Moments later, police sirens wailed outside, but when they stormed room 204, where Mr. Holden was last seen, it was empty. A window was ajar, indicating his escape route. In the aftermath, the entire school was in shock. Mrs. Mitchell cut her vacation short and returned, distraught that her absence had put her students in danger. An investigation revealed a grave error by the school's hiring agency. The real substitute teacher was tied up in his home, thankfully alive but shaken. Principal Dawson personally apologized to the students and their families. Security measures were ramped up, counseling sessions were offered, and the hiring process was revamped. Emma was hailed as a hero. "You saved us," Jessica whispered to her during a school assembly honoring her bravery. Months turned into years, but the shadow of those events still lingered. Every time a new teacher or substitute walked through the school's gates, suspicion arose. Trust once shattered was hard to rebuild. As for Mr. Holden, or Martin Keegan, his trail went cold. Some say he crossed state lines, continuing his heinous acts. Others believed he left the country, but one thing was certain. He was out there lurking in the shadows. However, one good thing emerged from this ordeal. The students of Woodridge High School became vigilant, looking out for one another. Friendships grew stronger and a collective sense of responsibility emerged. We realized that unity was our strength, and while monsters existed in the world, together, we could fend them off. The incident also fueled my passion for investigative journalism. The power of knowledge, the ability to uncover the truth, was intoxicating. I wanted to ensure that no other school or community would fall victim to such deception again. And Emma? She became a child advocate dedicating her life to ensuring children's safety. We often collaborated on projects, our shared experience forever linking us. The ordeal taught us a crucial lesson. Always trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. It was a lesson learned in the most harrowing way, but it was one that would guide us for the rest of our lives. The bell's chime was as familiar as the back of my hand, its toll signaling the end of another day at Lakewood High. But as my classmates streamed out with joyous laughter, I felt a weight in my stomach. Another detention, my 6th one this month, and for reasons I still couldn't quite fathom, Mr. Carrington, my literature teacher, had been increasingly hard on me, finding flaws in everything I did. From trivial things like mispronounced words, to more severe accusations like cheating on assignments, a claim I vehemently denied. I was an average student, never drawing much attention. Why would he have it out for me? Detention was held in the old school library, with its mahogany shelves and dim, yellowed lighting. Rows of ancient books stared down, witnesses to countless students who'd spent their time there as punishment. As I took my usual seat, Mr. Carrington was already there, that peculiar glint in his eyes that I'd grown to dread. "Good evening, Jake," he purred. His voice, smooth like honey, held an undertone that always made me uncomfortable. "Mr. Carrington," I responded, keeping my voice neutral. The hours seemed to stretch on endlessly, with him stealing glances at me from across the room. Once or twice I'd caught him scribbling in his notebook, only to hurriedly shut it when he noticed me looking. One day, my best friend Theo approached me with concern in his eyes. "Man, what's with Carrington? Why's he always got you in his crosshairs?" I shrugged. "No idea, but it's getting old. Fast." That evening, as detention ended, Mr. Carrington handed me back a paper. "This is subpar work, Jake. I'd expect more from you. Maybe more time reflecting here would help." It was an assignment I'd worked particularly hard on, and other teachers had praised it. Frustration bubbled up. "Why are you doing this?" He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "Because I see potential in you, Jake. Potential others don't." It wasn't the words, but the implication behind them that made my skin crawl. Days turned into weeks, and the detentions continued. But it wasn't just the after-school hours. I began noticing Mr. Carrington at odd places. The cafe I frequented, the park near my house, and even at the mall. Was he following me? Paranoia grew, and I decided to confide in Theo. Together, we hatched a plan to see if my suspicions were correct. One evening, after another detention, I took a detour on my way home, walking down a series of convoluted alleyways and streets. Theo trailed a distance behind, watching for any signs of Mr. Carrington. It wasn't long before he spotted our teacher, following discreetly, always staying a few paces back, hidden in the shadows. We had our proof. The next day, with the evidence in hand, we approached Principal Martinez. She listened intently, her face growing more serious with each revelation. "This is grave, boys. I assure you we'll get to the bottom of this," she promised. A full-blown investigation was launched, during which other students came forward, with their own unsettling experiences with Mr. Carrington. Some had felt his inappropriate gaze, while others had received notes with disturbing implications. The day of the final hearing, a letter was found in Mr. Carrington's office addressed to me. It was filled with confessions of his affection, detailing his obsession with me. The contents were disturbing, revealing a twisted perception of love and desire. The aftermath was swift. Mr. Carrington was dismissed from Lakewood and barred from teaching anywhere else. Legal actions followed, ensuring he'd face consequences for his actions. The incident shook the school community, sparking discussions about teacher-student boundaries and the importance of a safe environment. Counseling sessions were arranged for those affected, offering a space to process the trauma. As for me, it took time to trust again, to feel safe in spaces that once felt familiar. But with Theo by my side and the support of my family, I found strength. The experience taught me the importance of speaking out, of not suffering in silence. Years later, I became a youth counselor, dedicating myself to helping kids who felt lost, unheard, or threatened. While the memories of Mr. Carrington's obsession remained a dark cloud, it was a reminder of the difference one voice could make. It was my driving force, ensuring that no other student would ever feel as trapped or terrified as I once did.